Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to fall.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah, it's nice. It's not bad.
It's good for golfing.
Yeah, like my back's been hurt for a long time, and I haven't been able to golf. I haven't golfed since probably early September, mid-September. Yeah, it's painful. This is a beautiful time of year for golf, And the way my basketball schedules have worked, I've had some like long open afternoons. I could have done it, but I barely move. It's hard to golf.
Yes. Well, aging.
Yeah. It's not for sissies.
No. Just, we can be generally healthy otherwise. And I have found, to my great dismay, about how things change.
Yep.
Very quickly, too.
Very quickly.
All right. So, the weather's great. I mean, we're 16 days away from Halloween. Chocolate prices are still through the roof. I saw something on Nextdoor, and I don't know. Your kids are now out of the house basically, and but somebody had posted that I guess somewhere in Montgomery County, I did that whole thing that they've banned like Halloween costumes on whatever day, and so she was very disappointed. I'm like, I'm not really that surprised, right? I mean, we're
Montgomery County. You knew they were going to get to it anyway. Looked like someone's having some fun out there. You got to race out and stop it.
Yeah. For those of us that live normally, we just celebrated Columbus Day. For the others, they celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day, right?
Right.
So, but at least Trump, continues just to say, no, none of that nonsense and everything like that. So
that's right.
Hopefully that train slows down a little bit here during his term. It's also
because you know what? First of all, it's nonsense. Like we didn't steal no land; they didn't own the land. We moved in; they weren't there. They saw, oh wow, there's now some people nearby. In some cases, they made deals with them. In some cases, they attacked them. Right? That was the indigenous people's choice that they made. But they didn't own anything. They didn't establish anything. Right? They got beat by European business culture, the things that has made more prosperity than anything in the history of the planet. Grown the wealth level of humans beyond all imagination. You're now down to where there's less than a billion people out of the 8 billion people on Earth who are seriously malnourished. Right? We've made enormous strides in tackling hunger, malaria. Other diseases of the jungle, the outback or whatever, and enormous human accomplishment because the system of running business and government that the Europeans brought here prevailed. Thank goodness they came. Right, the other people were basically living in the Stone Age or before. It was Stone. I guess you could say it was Stone. They were solidly Stone Age with arrows, and they had commandeered animals for use a little bit. But I mean, there's signs of developing anything that's lasting. Were not there. They never created it. The idea that you're going to give a holiday to the one that was that was the bad savage idea that was vanquished, right, and replaced by the better idea is just. Something, it goes with the whole leftist thing. It's like, the farther the people are from you, the more the leftists care about them. Right? They're like Hamas. How is Hamas in keeping with American values after what they did on October 7th? How can any American say, yeah, that's how we should handle political conflict in our country or whatever it was they were handling? Because it's not really even political conflict, right? It's more just blind racist hatred. Oh no, those guys are heroes. They're fighting for independence. They're fighting for wiping out the entire other side, right? They never had in their minds to have independence or like who always rejects the two-state solution? It's not Israel. It's not the United States. We stupidly keep proposing it every time. It's Gaza. It's the Hamas. It's the Hezbollah, right? Because a two-state solution means they have to recognize Israel as a state, right? What's the other state, right? It's us and blank, right? It's Israel. So, until they're ready to acknowledge Israel is a state with a right to exist, then, they don't have a place at the table.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean,
don't get me started on Indigenous Peoples Day.
I needed to vent. Yeah. No, look, I mean, my, just on the whole Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day thing. I mean, to me, it's part of a whole leftist, plan, program, whatever, calculate where they look, they're looking at these holidays and all these kind of things. And if they can't make one up and get it approved, you take one on the calendar and then you look for one that's you can possibly co-opt and change and get your other leftist friends to go along with and endorse. And so you get that. I mean, it's not, it's not recognized, everywhere, but it has spread to a lot of the most liberal cities, obviously. And so you have that, and so, it'll be harder for them to say co-opt the 4th of July. They've already got Martin Luther King Day. That's kind of in their camp anyway. I don't know that they really want to get involved in a Veterans Day or Memorial Day. Labor Day is kind of theirs anyway. But President's Day,
when you were running AIM, did you let people off for Labor Day?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
a lot of conservative organizations, they either don't or they don't, or they do it, but they let you know they don't like doing it.
Yeah, well, we had a friend of mine working for another company, and their company had basically kind of a floating holiday thing where whatever the number of federal holidays there were in a year, you could take those, but you didn't have to take them on the federal holiday necessarily. So if you didn't agree with Martin Luther King or Labor Day, you come into the office and work that day, but then you can take off another day. So our office was small enough we could do that, and the AIM staff back in those days were pretty dedicated. So like I could show up, briefly on those days, and I would see some of my fellow coworkers virtually on any day except for maybe July 4th. Right. I think, or Christmas, that kind of a thing. But all the other holidays were fair game. I think with a lot of people, they just, they didn't have other plans. They wind up showing up at the office. But the challenge there is just that you show up to an office on a holiday, services are not rendered like air conditioning.
Right.
So if you're doing it during the summer, you're going to boil, and so it's like you had to take that consideration. So if I was going to do any work on a holiday, I'd show up super early in the morning when the building was still kind of cool, hadn't totally heated up from the weekend, and then spend a little bit of time there. And then, as soon as it started to get uncomfortable, I was gone. So, because it's just, it just gets stifling and it's dangerous. So but yeah, I mean, holidays like, those things are always under.
What we do, you got to be able to concentrate. We're not making widgets.
Yeah, your body can't function at that rate with all that stuff going, with the stifling heat and everything of that, and you can't open a window in these buildings, so it's like you're stuck.
That's right.
You can't.
I had one of the last offices on Capitol Hill where you could open a window, right, in the Rayburn building, and it was me and this lady Donna Harkins, who's a great person, and we had this huge office. It's like almost as big as where I live now. But it was just the two of us, 2 desks on the far other sides of the rooms. We'd have to yell at each other to talk, but we both liked it cold. We both did not like hot, warm, in the winter, they turned the heat up too high. It was uncomfortable. So man, like our office in the winter, like we had these windows wide open. It'd be like 30 degrees in there. People would come in to cool off. But yeah, we had a little press shop. We had a little jacket on. We were ready to go.
The last time I think I was in a building that that had windows that you could actually open and close. I think that was when we were in the old Colorado building on 1341 G Street, but it was an old building and they hadn't renovated it yet or anything like that. Once we moved to our new digs in 1993, that was it. Every single building after that, it was all, you were sealed up. You had to take the heat and the cold based on whatever the building determined, they were going to pump for the season, which is so that's a whole nother ball of wax there too. But they're trying to, they have these seasonal adjustments, right? But sometimes it gets warmer earlier or colder earlier, and so then they're off, right. And stuff. So that whole thing gets kind of crazy in and of itself. All right. So before we get to the news, which we've already spent a lot of time dilly-dallying about other things too, it is National. I looked at the calendar, and I chose National I Love Lucy Day.
I saw that.
So
I was never, I was never a big Lucy fan. It's her humor was embarrassment based, right? It was like she did embarrassing things, and so you're watching someone embarrass themselves,
like stuffing the chocolates in her mouth on the conveyor belt as it goes by too fast.
Yeah, and it's just like, that it just didn't appeal to me. It's like, you're a young kid. I was watching this as a kid, and my dad liked her. He was a big Lucy fan, and so it was on in our house. But I just never got what was so great about Lucy. I gotta admit, she must have been great. I mean, almost everyone who pays attention to show business says, "Oh yes, she was, a fundamental part of TV history and all that." And I don't argue that. As a woman, who dealt with the heads of the studios at that time, eye to eye, that was extraordinary in its own right. But it just wasn't for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a breakthrough of a female comedian on television with a program that popular,
right? She could dictate terms.
Right, she had a long career,
beat up like all other females in Hollywood. She owned her show.
Yeah, even after that show went off the air, they had another one later on, and all kinds of things.
Desi Productions.
Desi Lou, yeah, that was very iconic and everything like that. Yeah. All right, now news. So you already dealt with this a little bit, but not somewhat indirectly. So we have a ceasefire in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, and some are saying that I think Trump, and others maybe say it's an end to the war. It might be an end to the war. There's still a lot of things that have to be resolved, but at least the living hostages have been released, and I guess they're trying to locate or get the bodies of the ones that died in captivity. Though, my complaint about these things every single time we go through a hostage swap of any kind is that, Israel or whatever, they get 20 back and they give up 2,000 from their prisons. The ratio is always out of whack. But
all of our hostages swaps are the same thing. We weigh. What do we get? We gave 200 people for Bo Bergdahl. 200 high value targets for Bo Bergdahl. We are the good guys. The pro freedom forces are always going to get ripped off of those things. We, the people who value human life, always matter more. I want to say, though, I want to show people this. Can't really see it. But Don sends me these lists. Like, this is what we're going to talk about on the show. So at the top of the list for about 3 years now has been Russia's war against Ukraine and Israel versus Hamas war. And so, we aim to get to those things every week. They're big international events, and we start with international. I tell you all that to tell you this. The big news in the Russia-Ukraine war this week was settlement of the Hamas-Israel war. Because if you think about it, Russia and China are as aligned as they've been any time since World War II right now, right? I mean, they're aligned. Since then, they've gotten together and worked on things, but they don't really trust each other. So, they have a long history of reasons each of them has to distrust the other. So their alliances never go all that deep and they never last all that long. But right now, it's been fairly stable for, at least since Trump has come to power, right? They've said, well, we got to work on some stuff, right? Because he's going to change the math on us and fuel and economics, trade policy, and all kind of stuff. So this thing comes along. So Trump goes to the Middle East. He gets the medal, the highest medal given to a civilian in Israel, goes over to Egypt, gets the Order of the Nile, the highest medal awarded to civilians in Egypt, settles a 2,000-year-old war, its latest hot intervention. What did you have here? 740 days since October 7th, 2023. He gets all these people together. You look at that award, that signing ceremony, it's pretty much every major figure in the Middle East, pretty much every major figure in Western Europe, and some from beyond, and Trump. Now, if you're Putin or Xi, and you've never really trusted China or Russia, respectively, anyway, what does that do? What does that mean to you? Because, the world's behind Trump right now. You say what you want, and the haters all do. And, you saw the ridiculous attempt by the Biden people to take credit for it. Oh, this is the Biden plan that he laid down. It's like, well, yeah, but no one listened. No one did anything when Biden did it, right? No one responded. But this is over the finish line now. Yes, there's some fighting going on. They're not quite done with the fighting, but it is Gaza clans settling scores. They're not fighting Israel. They're not fighting us. They're fighting each other, and they're doing some bloodletting that I guess, I don't really understand their culture and how all this works, but that apparently has to happen at the end of all these conflicts. There's a period where they go out and find the 7 or 8 worst guys on the other side and hang them for a few days. And then, the other side retaliates, and then it keeps going it back. And then eventually it stops. It plays out. They kill all the truly high value targets, and they're weakened by it themselves. So that's where we are right now. And that is a problem, but it's not a huge problem to the big project that's being worked on here. So, so what are they going to be thinking? What's getting talked about today in Moscow and Beijing? And, one thing is the whole world is behind Trump, right? The whole, all the people that we are trying to make incursions with and form stronger relationships with are on the other side now. So what do we do? Because, acting together won't get us there, right? The only way to get in on that and to, bask in that shared glory or whatever, and take advantage of all the commercial and, business, political opportunities that are obviously going to flow from it, is, you got to get on one of those sides, right? You got to get somehow with one of those two has got to say, okay, I will join your program. Well, the early news out of China is it's not going to be them, right? They've announced in the last day or so that they're going to make it much harder to get the rare earth metals that we depend on for computer chips and laptops and all that kind of stuff, right? We have a lot more uses for it. It's growing all the time. That is why Trump was trying to get Greenland, and we talked about all this at the time. But China has said, okay, rare earth metals make Trump scream, right? That's a way to make him scream. I don't know if it still works. I think he may have some stuff in the hopper that obviates. Now, China controls 70% of the metals themselves, and a little more than 90% of the getting them to market. So, it's a big task to undo, but 11% of them are in Greenland. 3 or 4% of them are here. So, Greenland then becomes another, it goes back to being a challenge, right? They talked about that the first part of the administration. You hadn't heard about it in a while. Maybe about to hear about it again as a counterweight to China. Maybe as we discuss it, but we don't really do it if we get China to say uncle, right? We look like we're moving in that direction. China will see that it doesn't have the leverage it thought it would. What Russia needs is for the petroleum market to be stable, right? At a price that they can survive. So you always have leverage over Russia over fuel. Now they'll never get back to what they were because, Trump has took off the stupid rule against liquefied natural gas being exported and so forth. So we're back in business. We're back as the principal energy supplier of Europe, and will be by the end of this winter. The control will be almost complete. So, what happens with those guys? That I think you're going to see movement on one of those fronts. My guess is you're going to see Putin finding a way to wrap up Ukraine and try to get into Trump's good graces. I could be wrong, but I think that's what you'll start to see pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, what happened between Israel and Hamas and Trump's involvement with it, I mean, really put the squeeze on Hamas. Got the other countries to basically withdraw support or kind of give them an ultimatum, and so it left Hamas with very few options, and so they had to go and do this. So with if they actually get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed and whatnot, and then they that all those things, all the issues that they have to be settled to get settled. I mean, also the Gazans, I mean, they were war weary as well. I mean, it's just you have the citizens out there who are just tired of this war that Hamas had been putting out there. So it's going to be good for them. I mean, they got to figure out how they're going to rebuild everything that has been blown up and destroyed. But
they
they'll
have
figure
the 20-point plan, and you have all those countries now. There's all stakeholders in it, and they all need that stability. There helps all of them. So I think you'll see progress on that plan pretty soon.
I mean, with as much damage as has been done, that whole Trump vision, hey, look, this is rubble anyway. Let's just start and build this new stuff.
build a new thing. He's supposed to start clearing rubble next week. Is what he said yesterday. So
yeah,
I mean, they're not messing around.
Now,
one of Trump's superpowers is he makes these things irreversible, right? And it's like, so he makes these changes, and like I see people say, the minute he's gone, we're changing all this stuff back. No, they didn't. Biden was going to undo all the tariffs, and he got from Trump's first term. He got in. It's like, well, now I'm getting a lot of money here for not a lot of problem. I'll keep that going. So it becomes permanent. Now, the fight you're having on Capitol Hill. I mean, you think about this. Doge is gone. Doge is still here, but DEI is gone. Department of Education is gone. Large swaths of other departments are gone. The CP, BP, this is Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, CFB, PB. Anyway, that's gone. It's been subsumed into another agency, right? These were big pillars of the left that are obliterated. USAID, right? They're obliterated, right? So, can they be rebuilt? Probably not. One of the things we're working on now is, can they rebuild NPR, PBS? And just this is just a tiny example. It's a $1 billion over 2 years that they wiped out in the last appropriation. So it's not, they haven't taken PBS, NPR off the air. He gets donations, has other funding streams, states give it money, whatever. But it's like, that's one of the things that the Democrats want to get back on the bill, is they want to fund it again. It's like, that's done. Corporation Broadcasting is basically, I think they closed on the 30th of September. So they're not even around anymore. The people who funneled them the money are not even around anymore. So these organizations, all these things that they cut, all these deep cuts at Treasury and state and Department of Commerce, departments across government, right? Those people aren't coming back. That's not going to be, the day Trump leaves office, we return to the Biden era staffing levels, because they're gone and we've learned to do without them, and we don't have the money to add things that we've learned we can do without. So, these things, this stuff is locked in. It's like they get mad about this, the ballroom Trump built. And it's like, well, before, like, I don't know, you ever been to a state function down there? You ever seen what it's like?
No.
Okay, so it's tents. They erect tents, and they have a little hallway tent that takes you from the main White House into these tents. Now, my nephew got married in Baton Rouge years ago. 20 years ago, 20 years or more. He's been married a long time. They decided to do it outdoors in January. Now, here that's straight up lunacy, but there, highs in the 50s, lows in the high 30s, that wouldn't be a problem, right? You put heaters under the tent and everything. High was 22, low was 14. So everybody's in those tents freezing their buns, right? I mean, we're going to have fun, but it was very cold, right? And there's candles, everybody's huddled by, So because it doesn't work at that level. The tents don't work. You just can't get them tied to the ground solid enough, right? And that's what we're having state dinners in. That's what we're having the dignitaries from all over the world in. So Trump and 2 or 3 of his buddies say, I'll give you some, we'll just give you some money and just do this right. Have a freaking place to have a dinner. And so that's what they did. And, the left hates it. And I see every day on the internet, the day Trump leaves office, we're knocking that down. And I'm like, no, you're not. No president is going to walk in there, and even if a Democrat somehow won in 2028, which right now seems frankly pretty close to impossible, they're not going to tear that down. They need that. They're going to keep that. They're going to keep most of what Trump has done for them in place, because he is, if you are the person who is the president, he has definitely made the country better for you.
Yeah. So actually, I saw the ballroom, kerfuffle and whatnot. So explain to me how they're doing that. It's the back of the White House kind of a thing, and it's connected
kind
to
of
the
built
White
into
House.
the side of it. The one objection that got raised is that it looks like it's as big as the White House in the pictures that they show. It is pretty big, but and that's what Trump was doing on the roof that day, is he was looking to see, that's what construction guys do. They go up and look down at it to see what it's going to actually do to the space, right? And it's like when these guys do, subdivisions and stuff, like they spend a lot of time in helicopters flying over the property, seeing exactly what can be done and where, right? And that's just part of how you gather that information. And I'll never forget all the left is like, he's insane. He's walking around on the roof. He's got better things to do. The other thing, speaking of that, is like, they're always talking about the better things he has to do. But like, he flies to Israel. He signs this deal. He gives 2 speeches. He goes to Egypt. He signs another deal. He gives 2 speeches. He meets with all these leaders at both places. And then he gets on a plane and he flies back. And he's like 3 gaggles on the plane, I think someone said. 3 times they called in the reporters and said, if you want to ask him a question, you can ask him a question. 3 times riding back. And then he gets back and goes in and does the Charlie Kirk ceremony with no rest. You think that Harris could have done that? Biden, heck no, he wouldn't have even allowed that to be scheduled, right? But she couldn't do it. I mean, you got a guy who's capable of working 22 hours a day, and he's doing it.
Speaking of Biden, I've been thinking about this the other day, and I just want to get your opinion about this. Has he really kind of disappeared more than any other president in recent memory in terms of the public scene? I mean, after he left office, I mean, we're not hearing a whole lot of it. I mean, presidents usually try to stay out of the way of their successor, though Trump is kind of a lightning rod for a lot of things. But, I kind of wonder if Joe's age and other things also have basically kind of forced him into saying, you're just not going to see him that much, no matter what.
Well, a couple of things on that. One is, Trump was trying to stay out of the way. He was trying to, he left early. He tried to get out of the way and stay out of the way and not talk to any of these people, and really kept his public pronouncements to a minimum until they started messing with him, until they started coming after him with these documents cases and J6 cases and so forth. That was, Fonnie Willis or whatever. That was them attacking him. As for Biden, he's making his little appearances and his little statements, but he also appears to have cancer and appears to be taking a turn for the worse. And he's kind of entering a new phase of the care, is what we were told the other day. So prayers for him. Anybody going through cancer and, older guy like that, that's going to be hard to fight and painful. And, my little back thing, I've learned that, like, old man pain is real pain, right? Things hurt in a way that you never knew they could. So prayers for him, but I think that's to the extent he stayed out. That's probably wise health.
Yeah, I mean, well, if he's got prostate cancer, and it depends upon which stage he was at before. It can advance, and if once it starts getting into the stage 4 level, then it becomes very problematic, and everything like this. I mean, he is older, so that's also it's going to be harder to fight that. But we saw Ryan Sandberg, and we've seen a lot of other people that are younger. They get diagnosed like that, and they go very fast. But that's what happens when you get a late stage cancer, I think, of any type. That's what's going to happen. So no ill will wished upon Joe. I guess Kamala is kind of taking up the mantle because she's doing this foul mouth book tour, kind of thing going on there. And I don't know if anybody's really paying attention. I'm sure trying to ignore her because she's not saying anything that means anything to me.
I don't think that she's getting a lot of attendance, but she is getting a lot of press out of it because she seems to make a point of trying to say newsworthy things at every stop. Newsworthy meeting.
I think she still wants to be in the running for 2028. And
okay, I was going to say newsworthy in two ways. One is she continues to try to find new and interesting ways to pound on Trump. But the other one is, she's asked it everywhere she goes, is she going to run in 2028? And her answers are all over the board, from quite possibly to not likely and everything in between, and still thinking about it and so forth. I'd be surprised if she did, because one of the things that has to happen when you go to run for office is you go to all the people who are likely to give you money and you say, if I run, will you give me money? And I think what she's hearing is probably not like we did last time.
Yeah, right. Especially since she wasn't voted. They didn't vote for her as the nominee. They just were stuck with her. Right. with the famous 107 days. It wasn't enough time.
Right.
Despite the fact that they, what were they doing at the beginning? They were boasting about all the money that was coming in after the change, and now it's an excuse. It's like, oh, but we just didn't have enough time to do this. It's like, no, it wasn't a lack of time.
You spent what your $1.5 billion in 107 days, to fall further behind. Just like you didn't work. It didn't work out for you. That's okay. A lot of people, it's hard to get to be president, but it did. You weren't able to make it happen. And that's the story. And and not only that, but a lot of the reason you weren't is because the campaign was disorganized and she was unreliable as a candidate. She was frequently way late just because it took her too long to get ready. And, that kind of stuff. It's like, she wasn't in for the hustle. Like that is a grind of a job. And, Trump is fine with that. He's always grinding, but she's not a grinder. She's someone who's been handed stuff. Now, you could say, well, if she had a whole campaign, she had to start all that, but she did in 2019, right? She had her first event in Oakland. They had 25,000 people in a park to hear her speak. So she started out with a groundswell of support. 25,000 people at your first rally is pretty impressive. But then before, she didn't even make it to the first primary before it was clear that, she didn't have the organization or the discipline as a candidate to prevail. So I just don't see the donors going all in on her. But on the other hand, you can't fight something with nothing, and, who else do they really have? Right. I think they know that, Newsom would get destroyed. Pritzker would get destroyed. Buttigieg would get destroyed. And that's their big three hopefuls from what I can tell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think those guys are all looking at that and trying to see if there's a path for them. I mean, Newsom making a lot of news and noise because California, the legislature, passed a slew of bills for him to sign that are kind of all over the map. I mean, kind of predictably, liberal left kind of stuff like that. But then they throw in some other stuff I saw that there was one, I guess, about about fighting anti-Semitism in the schools and colleges, whatever, and it's got educators, California Teachers Association, all of them uproar because heaven forbid that the schools are, teachers have been instructed to actually kind of give like two sides of the story. Not
Right.
allow it, not don't allow your teacher to actually be a pro Hamas supporter, and that's all they can do. And so the CTA is all up in arms. It was like, oh, I'm sorry
Yeah. Yeah.
for all
Yeah.
of
I
that.
mean, that's another
So,
one. It's like,
all right,
they're all over themselves to fight for Hamas. Who in America, who are you trying to impress by saying you're pro Hamas? No one looks at that, and now there is polling that shows that like younger voters are not as pro Israel as previous cohorts. But you can't be for those thugs. I mean, they're famous for brutally murdering people.
right, all right. Just briefly too. So Trump threatened to, this past weekend, Trump threatened to ratchet up the tariffs on China, and then kind of eased off a little bit over the weekend. I guess it was Friday, and then by Sunday it was not as big a deal. But then China said some things, and there seems to be a little bit of a tit for tat. They seem to be in this constant dance. We've got a November 1, kind of thing coming up where they were supposed to figure this out and fix it. I think that that China and Trump. I think this is going to be kind of a continual loggerhead kind of a thing. They'll figure it out, but there's going to be this. Either side will probably find something to complain about and threaten the other side. Well, we're going to slap tariffs on this, and so then going, well, we'll slap tariffs on that. A lot of the stuff they slap tariffs on, would wind up being kind of minor,
Right.
in that way, right? They're not major things.
Right.
So
There's some really arcane stuff in there. And I think that's done for a reason. It shows we're taking action, or they're taking action without actually causing any significant damage to the other. It's basically like a jab. You don't really want to hit the mark, right? I just want to put it on you. I jab, like the coach said, but I'm not really trying to knock you out with that punch. I think that they are jockeying for position. It's pre-negotiations positioning. They want to come in with the strongest hand. We've got you over the barrel. You don't have us over the barrel. Both sides claimed, type of deal. So that's where I think this is going, and I look for some success on that. I think both of them want a breakthrough, and both of them appreciate that the other side does have some cards in this negotiation. There are some things. The Chinese have some leverage over us. Trump is working desperately to get rid of that. He understands that's a problem, and that's why he's after Greenland and other stuff. And, the stupid lefties lie, complain about it because they don't really understand it. But that's what's going on.
You've mentioned Greenland a couple of times here. So I think the Wall Street Journal did an article about traveling to Greenland because Greenland's now like on the map. So all these people trying to flood into Greenland because they want to see what all the big deal is about, and they're finding out that it's a little more difficult to traverse Greenland than they thought. The airport doesn't run very efficiently. You can't get to everywhere on Greenland. It's not like there's a hotspot tourist destination. They've built the infrastructure so they can shuttle you from one place to the other. So there's a whole different mentality there. So I'm glad I didn't put Greenland on my list to go visit anytime soon. It's not built for thousands of tourists to come in there or whatever it is, and just inundate the place because they don't have the capacity to do this. It's it's kind of a quiet country, but they were put it on the map, with Trump, and for resource reasons and things like that. But everybody in this day and age, it's kind of like they hear about a thing because thanks to social media, and they think they can go there and do something and put it on their TikTok or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. So you just get this flood of people going in there. It's like, you really
Yeah. So you're talking
Check
about
these things out before you go there, before you find out that you might get stuck there for days.
yeah, you're talking about a place that's 3 times the size of Texas that has 54,000 people, almost all of whom are on welfare in one way or the other. Right? Because that's what the Danish, that's what they set up. They're like, we don't care if you operate any businesses, just sit here and live, and here's enough money to make it through. Right? So you're basically talking about, that's Arlington's 110. So you're basically talking about half the population of Arlington, Virginia, and 5 times the state of Texas, 5 times the size of Texas. That's enormous. That makes it, it's the world's largest island, and it makes it enormous, vast expanse of snow that no one ever goes to. So yeah, it's going to be, they're not set up for tourism. They don't really care about it, but that'll die down some because one of my friends was on the, when they took the big, I guess Vance went up there, and maybe Marco early in the administration, they flew up there and looked around. Remember, they had a little visit. One of my friends who works for them went on that trip. He's like, you would not believe how cold that place is, because I've been in cold before. It's like, holy cow.
No outdoor weddings and tents, I guess.
No,
right?
no outdoor weddings there.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. All right, let's move on to it's day 15 of the government shutdown. For me, okay, look, I admit, not having worked in government, I don't have I have no skin in the game, and I don't get as a taxpayer, I don't get too upset about most of what happens when the government gets shut down because I believe that the government needs to be smaller and quit growing, and so
Right.
this is
you
an
can't
opportunity.
small it down, at least cut the hours of operation.
Right. Now, look, I mean, there are right there are things that are going on that that have some ramifications. I mean, I guess the National Park Service is doing it differently than they did the last time, in terms of shutting more access to more areas off and stuff like that. Though I did see some report, and I don't know if it's true, that a lot of these parks now are starting to attract squatters because there are no rangers around to shoo them away. That'll get resolved in time once we get back to business. But it's like I've said before many times with government cuts, it's like you need to be strategic. It's not just like just lay people off en masse or whatever. You need to look at where the fat is, things that aren't working, departments where regulations are just choking us to death, and and alleviate, get rid of some of that. But you don't have it so all of a sudden you get this kind of lumpy thing of where this happens and this happens and all these kind of things. I mean, today's supposed to be a military payday. I don't know whether or not they're getting paid. I don't know whether or not they have the authorization. They got paid.
They got paid.
Yeah. So
they got paid. Trump paid them out of tariff money, but he also said that he said a very rich man came to him and said, if they don't have the money to pay the military, I will pay the military. Right. And I don't know who. He said Trump said he would throw in some money too. So
yeah, part of the question was the legality of whether or not they could divert resources from other areas to pay the military. But
you can't. If you think about it, I guess for a one-time fix in the middle of a shutdown, it's okay. I guess the very rich man he knows is probably Musk, but it could be other people. But that's not a long-term solution. You don't really want private people paying the military, right? And it's a political issue, be outsized to its actual importance to living in the U.S., far outsized to it, that the government be open and operating. Right? People freak out. Oh no, they've got to make it. That's their only job. Keep this operating. Just figure it out. And it's like, so, you can deny that, right? And you can say, well, actually, this shutdown helps us, and longer it goes on, the better for this reason or that reason. And both sides, have done that in the past, depending on the situation with the shutdown. But that's the thing. It's like it's advantageous to some people, or it wouldn't be shut down. So I think in my lifetime, I don't ever remember dynamics around a shutdown quite like this one. For one thing, Republicans are always to blame, and the pressure is always on Republicans to do whatever it takes to reopen, right? It's never the Democrats who need to fold. Well, now you have one where that argument's not resonating. That's not really working because, it's the Republicans, they passed a clean continuing resolution in the House to fund the government through November 21st. The Democrats say they want the House to pull that back and reopen negotiations, right? So that they can add back spending for PBS, NPR, Obamacare subsidies. It's about $1.3 trillion that they want to add back. Okay, we're $38 trillion in debt, and we have the numbers moving in the right direction, downward, right? We're between tariff income, the tax income, and the growth. By the time we get another government economic report, we could be up. We should be over 4% growth, maybe strongly headed toward 5%. Which, Jerry Powell would need to act on quickly with rate cuts and so forth. So, you have a lot going on here that's being stopped by, you can't get out federal economic information. But, we're not yet to the point where as Republicans, where we have to care, right? They're the ones with a political problem here. They're the ones desperate to make something happen. And I saw that her name is Stansberry or something. She's from New Mexico, House member from New Mexico. And she was today. It's like, we're here to compromise. And it's like, you're girl, I'm back in Washington ready to do work. And it's like, well, you're part of this. You're in the House. Your part of this has done their work, right? The people who need to do the work are in the Senate. The Democrats are going to have to decide how long can they take this, and Trump's making it hurt them politically by the longer they're out, the more people rush fires, and so they can decide like how long they want to let these job cuts go on, and just knocking people off the payroll go on, and when they get to a point where they can't, that's not what are the federal retired employees. People get mad at them and call them and tell them to fix it, to stop that from happening, then they'll be ready to sign pass a clean CR in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I saw something where I think one of the things that was going to happen here too is that about $27 billion in federal money going to mostly liberal, blue cities and states, whatever, has been frozen as a result of this, and so Trump is making them hurt. Yeah. It's like you want this transportation project? No. And I was reading about this. They were going to pour all this money into an extension of what they call the Red Line in Chicago and push it basically into the projects. And the people that were interviewed were like, "Yeah, this will be great because it'll cut my time to get to a Walmart or the grocery store or whatever and things like this." And look, I try to be compassionate about these things, but I'm like, why are we funding this, something that's going into the projects, which seems to me to be inherently dangerous anyway? And I'm not sure what we get out of that. I don't think there's going to be a lot of productivity necessarily coming out of that. This is definitely it's a local prerogative, absolutely. And so you see this, but the Democrats, they have just been intransigent on Obamacare and Medicare and Medicaid. They seem to be willing to die on that hill, and it doesn't make any sense to me because the Republicans, all they have to do is just say, look, we have spent $27 billion or whatever it is on Obamacare subsidies over the last X number of years, or this is how much
Medicare, it hasn't done any good because here you are again. Right, you didn't save it.
Right, and please explain to me, because I know over and over again, it's like, how does extending this really make any sense? Because why? Because the number of people that are eligible for Obamacare subsidies is far and wide, and And so you have people with means technically that can get it, but it's income based and not, not what assets you've got and everything like that. So, if your income happens to drop, you can qualify for this, and the taxpayers will foot the bill for 70-80% of your insurance premium. But it doesn't make any sense as to why this and it goes. What did Obama say? When he pitched this whole thing, your premiums are going to go down, right?
Right.
You can
You like your doctor,
and
you can keep your
that
doctor.
never happened. That
Yeah,
basically never happened. I mean, he talked
that's
about,
right.
it's going to be like a $2,500 savings. And, within a year or two, most people saw their premiums go up. I remember I saw the insurance premiums at AIM. I remember I saw our group plan just go up, because it was, now, Obamacare put everybody into the same pot. In essence, the insurance companies lost the ability to rate every person. The liberal said you can't discriminate against somebody's ill health, and so now they have these pools of people that they insure, and they're not really sure how much to charge them because they don't really know how sick they are. They don't have they can't go and actually look at that and make that a factor in it. And if it does turn out to be bad, the rates go up, and that's what was happening. Young people are generally healthy. As you get to middle age and older, you're going to need more medical care, and so that requires more expense. And I remember going through things where, depending upon your age and your health, determined whether or not you were going to get insurance and how much it cost. And
Right.
because they can't do that anymore, it's kind of that one size fits all. It creates this. It just, once again, another
Well, it's worse
distortion
than
of the
that. It's
market.
guaranteed losers.
Right.
You got to,
Well, all the sick people can join. Right.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can insure, you have to insure people with lung cancer. Well, they're never going to pay enough premiums to cure their lung cancer. They're guaranteed loser. And you can't make companies take guaranteed losers without giving them a bunch of government money to do it. Right. The best thing was just to stay out of it and let it get dealt with like it got dealt with. Because, there are people who say, wow, there's a money-making opportunity here if I can make this part of this process more efficient, like the doc in the box people. 20 years ago, you're just going to walk in, and it's usually not even a doctor. You're going to make out a form, and they're going to see you, and they're going to tell you what's wrong with you, and they're going to prescribe drugs, and you go take those drugs or get a cast or whatever, you break your hand or whatever, and then you're fixed up. You don't go to a hospital or doctor or nothing. You don't have any continuing relationship. You're just getting a service, right? Fix my hand. Okay, hand fixed. See you later, right? Who saw that model coming? But that model, to me, especially in low income areas, beats, Obamacare or any of these government Medicare, Medicaid. I mean, it's like this is because like it's the same thing. Most of the people in the ghetto, guess what? The younger ones don't need health care and the older ones do. Right? It's just the way it is. It's the way people are. So if you can make it where you fix all those broken hands, you don't have to put all those people on Medicare. You don't have to take care. You don't have to have this continuing care regimen until they get old enough to need it, like we do, right? Like you kind of got to go to somebody now, right? And talk about your deal every so often. I probably get in the same situation now with my back that I'm going to have to talk to somebody every so often when it flares up from now on. Okay. So our relationship with our doctor, it can be, the first time I went to see about my back, I did go to a walk-in, and this is, they gave me something that was mildly helpful. Right. But it was in that case, it was something that needed more care. So, we're going to have to start looking at everything but the major stuff is point of sale. Or whatever the cheapest way to do it is.
All right, we're running out of time, so I'm going to run through these quickly and get your feelings about this. Trump awards Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. His wife his widow Erica was there. Yeah, I mean, I think Trump continues to show how deeply affected he was by Charlie Kirk's death. It's a great honor for him, and TPUSA has become a stronger organization. There was so much more interest after his death, and everything like that. But it still remains to be one of our great tragedies of our time.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and they got some real empathy out of Trump on that. He gets accused by the other side of being unemotional and uncaring about all this stuff. He obviously cared about this.
Yeah. Supreme Court's going to be hearing arguments on the Voting Rights Act. So I'm kind of curious to how that will go. It's an interesting thing. I mean, because we see a lot of the stuff going on with the gerrymanders and how it applies and all this kind of stuff. So maybe the Supreme Court will kind of fix this one way or the other.
So that is a ginormous case. CNN said yesterday it could mean 19 more seats for Republicans. So like the case that this came, and I said at the time, and this was probably 25, 30 years ago, that this is the district that'll eventually get this thrown out. There's a district in Louisiana that is created solely to produce a black congressman. It extends from Shreveport in far northwestern Louisiana. Shreveport is 8 miles from the Texas border. It's about 35 or 40 miles below the Arkansas border. So it's wedged way up in the northwest corner of the state. Baton Rouge is in the south part of this, not the farthest south part, but it's South Louisiana, well below the midpoint. This district stretched like that from Shreveport to Baton Rouge, solely to produce a black member. And that's going to get rubbed out. I think that, Sandra Day O'Connor said, 25 years from now, we won't need any kind of racial set-asides of this country. And I think she's right. I think that, there should not be racial set-aside congressional seats. If you can win them, you can win them. But, I think it's going to make politics a lot more interesting. It is going to force, conservatives, like the first time or two around, it'll be a big deal for conservatives. But then, Democrats are going to have to make the case on real terms, and not all of them will be able to, but some will. And so you'll start seeing some and there's some places where they're amenable to it. Like, we think of Mississippi as one of the reddest states in the nation. But when you cross over from Louisiana, the counties on the top, like 2/3 to 3/4 of Mississippi along the border are almost all Democrats, where Benny Thompson comes from. So, I mean, you're going to have, I don't think you're going to rub out Benny Thompson with this. I think he'll still be getting elected. So you'll have some pocket. You won't wipe out every black congressman, not even from the South. In fact, you may get more.
Okay. Trump doesn't get his Nobel Prize, but the Venezuelan opposition leader does. Which, I'm fine with that. I mean, I'm not sure how important the Nobel Peace Prize is, except as for Trump is.
It's obviously a leftist deal, right? It's obviously leftist awarding leftists. Yeah. So, and the fact that they didn't give it to Trump says they're willing to be known for that, and they don't care. And then the lady said, I'm doing this for the people of Venezuela, who I love, and Donald Trump, because Donald Trump brings peace to the world, right. And I love to do that for us. So it didn't really work.
Yeah,
out.
I know. I love that. It's like let's poke him in the eye on that one. I mean, that was great.
But I mean, it doesn't look like she did it for that reason. It looks like she spoke from the heart.
Yeah. Now, look, my feeling about this is that it doesn't matter what Trump does. There's just like no way in heck that the committee will ever give him a Nobel Peace Prize. They're just not going to do it. It's just never going to happen.
Resist.
I mean, they could have. What's that?
Resist. That's like their thing. Resist. Like, okay,
I guess
whatever.
So. All right, real quick here. Then Turning Point USA apparently is going to plan an alternative halftime show to the Super Bowl. Anything is better than Bad Bunny. I'm not sure what they're planning on. I don't know if you've seen anything else, but I just saw a headline, didn't really read into it. So,
my understanding is whatever they were doing, you had to pay to get access to the show, and it's already sold out. So unless they're going to add ways to get access to it, you can't. You're stuck with Bad Bunny. My thing is like, do not. I want the movement to quit jumping at stuff like Bad Bunny. It does not matter who sings at the Super Bowl. It's not going to be, they're not appealing to me and you on this anymore. We're past the age where they appeal to you. It's going to be for young people, and it's going to be a thing that we don't understand, and just get over it and move on. It's utterly unimportant.
Yeah. All right. General Motors is taking a $1.6 billion write down, which is mostly regarding the EVs. Other car makers are doing similar types of things. We saw a big run up in sales up to September 30th before the tax credit expired, but now EVs have got to rely on themselves. So this is going to be a tougher market for them going forward.
Musk is bullish on it still. He did, it was interesting to me. I thought, as the obvious move would have been to pull out of that or de-emphasize it in his portfolio. And he doubled down, and he thinks, once it's a choice, then you can get the appropriate competition and pricing levels and all that. And, he's already got the infrastructure. He'll still make money. It'll be anybody who tries to come in against him. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think for the EVs, it's just like you should be able to judge the EV on the fact that your markets are now equalized. No tax credit that kind of distorts the market. It's
right.
Like
no government.
Here's the price of an EV, right? And here's your gas, car. Here are the features. Test drive. What do you like better? If you really like the EV and it's going to cost you $10,000 or $20,000 more, if you've got the cheddar to do it and you can buy it, go ahead. That's fine. But you're no longer being incentivized, by $7,500 of the government, our money, the taxpayer money, right, that says you should be buying that car. So look, Musk can do whatever. He made tons of money on our backs with that. The tax credits he took full advantage of. It was out there. I don't have any disdain for that, because he got his government contract. He's doing it the way he needs to do it. So that's fine. Virginia-based. So Spanberger and Winsome Sears had a debate. Sears really went on the attack. A lot of people weren't sure that was the thing to do, but Spanberger really had a real problem with the candidate for attorney general running for Democrats. She just can't bring herself to really disassociate herself from him and his comments. And in Virginia, everybody runs separately, right? Governor, lieutenant governor, and so you could wind up that Jason.
You're not a slate, but you're a ticket.
Right, you're not a slate. So if she wins the race, she could still wind up with Jason Miyares as the attorney general. Right. Potentially. Polling
shows she likely will now at this point. Miyares has passed Johnson, and Sears is within margin of error. This was a race, just so people who don't live here know, that was 17 or 18 points in the summer. It was a blowout. Miyares was down 11. The lieutenant governor was down 15. And now it looks like that, the Republicans have a chance to win the whole thing. And it's based on, two things. One is, boys and girls bathrooms, boys and girls sports. Democrats have had that's about a 60-40 question in Virginia, and Democrats are on the 40 side, and it's really hurt them. Sears is not a great campaigner. He's not been a great fundraiser. I can't really honestly say I think she'd be a great governor, but she's not for abortion till birth, boys and girls bathrooms, and so forth. There's been, there was the hateful person in Arlington that said they didn't want to let Sears drink out of the water fountain, and if she wasn't letting gay, trans men and girls bathrooms, and then you had the unhelpful creep down in Arlington also, who was in the bathroom at Washington Liberty High School swimming pool, playing with himself, and 2 9-year-old girls saw him, and and she had to come out. They had to basically defend that, right? And then now, so the the attorney general candidate for the Democrats has put out, was text messages reveal where he was saying, if he had 2 bullets and he had Hitler, Pol Pot, and this guy Walker, who was the head of Republicans in the Virginia House, what would he do with the 2 bullets? And he said, you kill them both, put both of them in Todd Gilbert was his name, put both of them in Todd Gilbert's head and kill his children. And because, they're little Nazis and nothing really happens unless you make this really hurt. So, and the person he's texting with is another Democrat. They're like, dude, your language is way out of line. He goes, well, they don't, they're not going to get the message unless we do something like this. So, they have a guy openly talking about killing people for political violence straight up. And so they get in the debate, and this is what the original question was. And Sears asked her about it. She's like, you have 3 children, Abigail. How can you put up with that? How can you stand by this guy? And she just stood there and did not say a word for minutes, right? And just let the time run. She's just standing there. And it's like, okay, if you're so afraid of your base being into political violence that you cannot denounce what this guy is saying, then you're not what Virginians are looking for in a governor, right? You didn't even have the courage to back it. You just stood there. So I think that people saw what they needed to see, and I think that you might see one of the biggest political upsets in the recent history in November, because the momentum's all on Sears' side.
All right, and then just for those, since we had the Nobel Peace Prize, if you haven't, for anybody out there, just look at the show notes for the Ig Nobel Peace Prize. You go through that. There's some pretty funny stuff in there. It just shows you how ridiculous some of the money that we spend on things is. Like, why are we doing this? So once again, government shutdown may provide some good relief for all of that. And then finally, we'll end on kind of a sad note with the passing of Sister Jean, the chaplain for the Loyal Chicago basketball team. I guess is she just the basketball, or was she for the whole all sports? I don't even remember.
Anyway, well, I don't think they even have football, so I think her main focus was the basketball.
Yeah, so she became famous when they made their big run. How was it, 7 years ago?
Yeah,
and everything like that. So she had just stepped down recently for health reasons and passed away. But yeah, she was quite the star.
She really was, and for being prayerful and dedicated to that team. So good for her.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have more than run out of time. Thanks for sticking with us. We appreciate it. Please, as always, stay healthy, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America, and we will be back again next week. It's always this ending thing here.